"Stop it, Daniel. It's hurting me."
Please stop.
The sun cast long shadows across the pristine streets of Lekki Phase 1 as Mrs. Ogunlade's silver Toyota pulled into the compound she shared with her longtime neighbor, Mrs. Adebayo. The two women couldn't have been more different in their approach to life and parenting, yet their friendship had weathered a decade of Lagos's unrelenting pace. Mrs. Ogunlade, with her flowing baboos and easy laugh, ran her interior design business with the same relaxed grace she applied to raising her son, Daniel. Her neighbor, Mrs. Adebayo, pressed and proper in her tailored suits, managed her chain of pharmacies with the same precision she used to regulate her daughter Cynthia's life. Their children, both 12, had grown up more like siblings than neighbors. Daniel, with his lanky frame and quick smile, complemented Cynthia's quiet intelligence perfectly. They could often be found studying together under the compound's massive mango tree, their textbooks spread around them like fallen leaves. That evening, as the families shared dinner, a regular occurrence, Daniel cleared his throat with unusual formality. "Mummy," he began, his fingers nervously tracing patterns on the tablecloth. "I want to ask for something." Mrs. Ogunlade paused, her jollof-laden spoon halfway to her mouth. "What is it, Daniel?" "A phone," he said quickly, as if the words might escape him if he didn't rush them out. "All my classmates have one, and Coach Peters says it would be good for coordinating basketball practice times." The adults exchanged glances across the table. Mrs. Adebayo's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. They all knew her views on children and phones. But Mrs. Ogunlade considered her son thoughtfully. "A phone is a big responsibility, Daniel," she said finally. "What makes you think you're ready?" If you are enjoying this video, don't forget to give this video a like and subscribe to the YouTube channel, and also share your thoughts below. What followed was a negotiation that would change everything. Daniel promised to maintain his position among the top 5 students in his class. More than that, he vowed to reach the #1 spot. His mother, impressed by his determination, agreed to the challenge. The next 2 months saw a transformation in Daniel. Basketball practice became a reward after study sessions. Cynthia, already a top student herself, helped him create study schedules and quiz him before tests. Their friendship deepened through these focused afternoons, their shared goal creating a new bond between them. When the term results were announced, Daniel's victory celebration filled the compound with joy. He had done it. First position, with marks that made even Mrs. Adebayo raise her eyebrows in approval. True to her word, Mrs. Ogunlade presented him with a new phone, its screen still wrapped in protective plastic. Daniel was so excited, like his world just came through. The first few weeks with Daniel's new phone transformed the dynamics of the compound. Where once the sound of bouncing basketballs and children's laughter filled the air, now there was a new kind of quiet. It wasn't an empty silence, but rather one filled with the soft taps of fingers on glass and occasional bursts of giggles over shared videos. Daniel and Cynthia discovered a world of educational apps first. They would huddle together on the compound's wooden bench, solving math problems on Khan Academy or learning new languages on Duolingo. Mrs. Adebayo, despite her initial reservations, found herself impressed by their dedication to learning, even if it came through a screen. "See what I found," Daniel exclaimed one afternoon, showing Cynthia a basketball training video. "Coach Peters says I could make the state team if I keep improving." His eyes sparkled with excitement as he demonstrated a new dribbling technique he'd learned online. The phone had become an extension of his existing passions, a tool for growth. But as days melted into weeks, subtle changes began to surface. Daniel started missing basketball practice, claiming he needed to watch just one more video about techniques instead of actually practicing them. Coach Peters noticed the shift in his star player's commitment. The children's social media exploration started innocently enough. Their shared TikTok sessions grew longer, their content choices gradually shifting from basketball tricks and dance moves to more mature themes. One humid afternoon, while their mothers were at a business meeting, Daniel and Cynthia sat in his room, scrolling through recommended videos. A thumbnail caught their attention. It wasn't inappropriate. It skirted the edges of what they knew they should be watching. "Should we click it?" Cynthia whispered, her voice a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Daniel hesitated, his finger hovering over the screen. "It's just a video," he said finally. "We can always close it if it's bad." They played the video. What they saw was a mix of horror and excitement. They have never seen people move that way before, their body moving in a repeated pattern. It looked like they were doing something stupid, but he noticed they really enjoyed it. Their academic performance began to show the first signs of strain. The basketball court stood empty more often now. Coach Peters left increasingly worried messages for Mrs. Ogunlade about Daniel's absences. "The state team scouts are coming next month," his last message said. "But I can't recommend a player who doesn't show up." One sunny afternoon at their school during lunchtime, Daniel and Cynthia exchanged panicked glances. During break time, they huddled in a corner of the library, heads close together. "Can we watch more of those videos after school time?" Daniel whispered. "Okay," Cynthia answered with curiosity. "I will come over after lunch." Aunty Bisi, watching from her veranda, saw what the busy mothers couldn't. She noticed how Daniel and Cynthia no longer played outdoors, how they rushed inside immediately after school. That evening, she intercepted Cynthia on her way to Daniel's house. "Child," she said gently, "secrets have a way of growing until they consume us." Cynthia replied in polite manner, "Thank you, Mama, but I'm fine," as she moves quickly to Daniel's house. In Daniel's house, both sitting in the living room as they watch more of those horrifying videos. "Should we try it?" Daniel said. Cynthia replied with curiosity, "No. We can, it's not just right. What if?" Daniel cuts in. "No one will notice. Besides, our both parents won't come back in 3 hours' time," Daniel said, trying to convince her. Cynthia then decided to try it out. They both got on bed, with Cynthia being down and Daniel above, trying to mimic what they saw in the video. Suddenly, there was a loud scream. "Stop, you are hurting me, remove it. Please stop, it's very painful. I don't want to do it again." She stood up quickly and ran out of the room. Daniel, on the other part, was full of regrets, thinking deeply on how to approach Cynthia and apologize. Cynthia, usually top of her class, sat staring at her paper, her mind elsewhere. With the incident that had happened, all in her head, every conversation they had, every video they watched, and every act they pulled. The numbers swam before her eyes, meaningless symbols that couldn't compete with the images and videos constantly playing in her thoughts. That same week, Daniel missed the crucial basketball tryouts for the state team. He sat in his room instead, phone in hand, as Coach Peters called repeatedly. The dream of a sports scholarship silently slipped away. Daniel finally met Cynthia during lunchtime in school. "I am sorry," he said softly. "I didn't know I would hurt." "It's fine," Cynthia replied, smiling. "I forgive you, but I will love to try it again." "What?" Daniel said in disagreement. "What of the pains?" "I am not sure it will be painful this time," Cynthia replied in assurance. "I will come over after school," she said as she went back to her class. That afternoon, the mothers were at work, dealing with their business crisis as usual. Daniel and Cynthia were in his room, the door locked, as they were repeating the same experience they had in the same position. Mrs. Ogunlade had come home early, worried about her son's missed tryouts. She stood outside Daniel's door, listening to the whispered conversations and muffled sounds from within. "Daniel," she called, trying to keep her voice steady. "Open this door right now." Inside the room, panic erupted. Daniel fumbled. Cynthia looked desperately for somewhere to hide. But there was nowhere to go, no way to escape the moment they had both feared. The door opened. Mrs. Ogunlade stood in the doorway, her eyes taking in the scene. The guilty faces, the unmistakable air of secrets exposed. "What happened here?" she said. "Start from the beginning," her voice carrying neither judgment nor anger. "Not from today, but from the real beginning." The story spilled out in chunks and pieces, interrupted by tears and long silences. As they talked, Mrs. Adebayo arrived, bursting through the door with the force of her worry. She stopped short at the scene before her, her daughter's tear-stained face, Daniel's hunched shoulders. "Let them finish," Mrs. Ogunlade said firmly. The next few hours unfolded like surgery, painful but necessary. The children revealed everything, the progression from innocent videos to inappropriate content, the secrets they had mimicked. Each revelation cut deeper than the last. The revelation of their online activities hit both mothers differently. Mrs. Adebayo's first reaction was rage, not at the children, but at herself. Her strict rules, she realized, had created walls instead of bridges. Mrs. Ogunlade's usual easy manner crumbled into quiet devastation. "I thought giving him the phone would help him grow," she whispered. "I thought." "You both thought what mothers think." Aunty Bisi stepped in. She heard everything from the window. "Love and trust are enough. But our children are growing up in a different world than we did." Mr. Johnson, the school counselor, arrived an hour later, called by Mrs. Ogunlade in a moment of clarity. He had seen similar cases before. His presence brought a professional calm to the chaos. "What matters now," he said, looking at each face in the room, "is not how we got here, but where we go next." The phone would be gone, of course. Both children would start counseling, separately at first, then together. The mothers, too, would attend sessions, learning to navigate parenting in a digital age. Aunty Bisi suggested weekly gatherings at her house, a safe space where mothers and children could rebuild trust through conversation and shared activities. "Sometimes," she said, "healing requires a village." Daniel had returned to basketball, but with a healthier perspective. Coach Peters noticed the change immediately. Gone was the distracted, troubled boy, replaced by someone more focused, more present. New phones were eventually allowed, but with strict guidelines and open discussions about content and usage. "The goal isn't to fear technology," Mr. Johnson explained, "but to master it rather than be mastered by it." Yet amid all this progress, Mrs. Adebayo struggled with a decision she'd been contemplating. Finally, during one of Aunty Bisi's gatherings, she shared her thoughts. "I've been offered a position managing our new branch in Abuja," she announced. I think Cynthia, and I need this fresh start." The news hit everyone differently. Daniel, though saddened, understood it wasn't a punishment, but a necessity. On their last evening in the compound, both families gathered under the mango tree. The children, now noticeably more mature, sat comfortably with their mothers. Aunty Bisi had prepared a feast, and Mr. Johnson had come to share in the farewell. "Every ending is a beginning," Aunty Bisi said, passing around plates of jollof rice. Cynthia hugged Daniel, both of them understanding that while their childhood innocence was gone, something more valuable had taken its place: wisdom, resilience, and the knowledge that healing was possible. Daniel stood with his mother watching until it disappeared around the corner. 6 months later, it was clear that the distance hadn't diminished their bond. Cynthia was thriving in her new school, leading a student initiative on digital awareness. Daniel had made the state basketball team, carrying his story as a quiet reminder of resilience. The mother's business had expanded, their partnership stronger for having weathered the storm together. Mr. Johnson used their case anonymously to help other families, while Aunty Bisi's truth circles had become a community fixture, drawing families from across Lagos. They had all learned that healing wasn't about erasing the past, but about using it to build a stronger future. Their story became not just about the dangers of unchecked technology, but about the power of truth, the strength of family, and the endless possibility of new beginnings.